Hi neighbor, Emily here. Today is March 23rd, 2020, the year we will never forget. And this is my first video on sharing with you what I've learned so far throughout my sourdough journey. From all the books that I read and all the sourdough bakers that I talked to, I know that there are as many ways to do sourdough as there are sourdough bakers. I'm here to share to you mine, with the hope that I could help you to start. You find your own ways. I would like to talk about Norma, our sourdough starter, what she is, and then I would like to talk about how we can be a good partner with her, meaning keeping her alive. And then I would like to talk about how to make a levain out of a sourdough starter, which we can then use together with our intention to turn water, flour, and salt into a sourdough loaves. Okay, Norma, Norco Mama. She was born here in Norco about 1 year ago, and since then she's been giving birth to thousands of sourdough loaves here in Norco. She is an ecosystem. Inside her there are millions of wild yeast and bacteria that lives in there. Sourdough starter is very unique. Each one of them is different, depending on what type of flour that we feed it, what type of water, and also the microflora that lives in a sourdough baker. Just like any other type of society, it's a collective being. It has needs. It needs a source of energy to keep on going and keep on living, and it has a cycle. The cycle is something that we will see together, and very, very, very interesting to observe. If we as the caretaker do a good job and provide food whenever it's needed, you will see the rise and fall of a sourdough starter. It rises as the yeast and bacteria do a feeding frenzy and eat all those fresh flour and water and produces gas, and you see the bubbles and it start to climb up. And as the food source diminish, the bubbles start to disperse into the air and the sourdough start to go down. That same action of going up is the same action that helps a sourdough bread to rise when we mix it. I don't want to get ahead of myself. We will talk about that in the next video. And okay, Norma specifically is what we call 100% sourdough. It's 100% hydration sourdough starter. That means there is the same amount of flour and water in here. If there's 50 grams of flour in there, there is 50 grams of water in there as well. There is a stiffer sourdough starter that has more flour than water. I've never tried to make one before, but I heard it's very awesome as well. But I like to stay with 100% hydration sourdough starter. It's nice to know that because it helps us to remember how we feed her. So I'm going to jump into that part of the video now and how to feed her. I'm going to start with the type of flour. And I would like to begin everything with saying that do not be afraid on making mistake. In the beginning, I put her through the ringer. I feed her all type of flour, whole wheat, spelt, rye, all sorts, part of it, because I want to know what happened. And it is interesting to know what happened. So do explore, do get to know your starter, especially if you did not make her from the beginning. Try all sorts of different stuff before you make anything. Get to know her, get to know the cycle, get to know the temperament, get to know what different flour brings into her behavior, what different of temperature bring into her behavior. Keep on trying it out until you feel like, I do know you now, you're my partner now, and then make something with it. It will be much easier for you to do that when you already get to know your starter. So, after all sorts of trial that I've put her through, decided that I really like the mix of regular white flour and just a little bit of rye. That little bit of rye gives a really nice flavor, and it helps her get excited. Too much rye get her too excited, and then she ries too much, and then, you know, in the middle of the night I'm like, oh god, it's overflowing. So just a little bit of rye, and that little bit is 10% of the whole flour that I used to feed her. When feeding her, it's really easy if you think of in terms of ratio. 1 to 2 is the minimum that you can go on feeding a sourdough starter. 1 part a mature starter, that means a starter that has rise and fallen, that's a mature starter. 1 part of that, 2 parts flours and 2 part water. For example, in grams, let's start thinking in grams and not cups. Grams is much more reliable because cups can be different in my house and in your house because of the difference in humidity, the difference of the flour that's you have, whether it's compacted or not compacted. So things in gram, get a scale, it is available everywhere. So 1 part Norma, 2 part water, and 2 part flours. In grams, for example, 25 gram Norma, 50 gram flour, and 50 gram water. You notice that the flour and water is the same because, again, Norma is 100% hydration type of starter. There is the same amount of the same amount of flour as there are water inside Norma at all time. You can go with 1 to 2 ratio, and then depending on the temperature of the water, temperature of the room, it can sustain her for around 12 hours. If you go farther, 1:4 ratio, it can sustain her for perhaps 24 hours. Again, it depends on the weather, depends on the temperature. This is why I recommend to really get to know your starter first before you attempt to bake anything. I personally like to feed her in 1:4 ratio at any time because it can buy me about 24 hours at least, and anything shorter than that, you know, mommy ain't got no time for that. So 24 hours is the minimum. I did mention the temperature affect her speed on eating the food. If you bake often, I recommend keeping her in room temperature and feed her every single day. But if you're not a baker that bakes every day, or you want to go on a travel, for example, cold slows her down. So you can put her in the fridge and she will eat that food that you give her slowly. If you put her in the fridge and you put a 1:4 feeding ratio, meaning 25 gram of Norma, 100 gram of water, and 100 gram of flour, you can put her in the fridge and she will be okay and happy and all good for 1 week. You could stretch to 2 weeks, and then you gotta feed her. I would like to show you how I feed her through a demonstration. What you need is, you know, you have a jar of Norma and you have a clean jar to feed her. You got purified water. Please use purified water if you live in Norco because our tap water is really harsh. You have your flour. I always recommend organic flour no matter what type of flour you use. Like I said, I prefer a mix of white flour and just a little bit of rye. Organic is preferable, obviously, because there are much more life in there than if it is non-organic. You can still feed her non-organic flour. There's no problem there. You won't kill her, but it is about providing something where the life in there can thrive better. You need a spoon to stir it. Now, I will show you a feeding of 1:4 ratio. You got your clean jar. I'm going to take 25 gram of it. Take 25 gram, like so. Like I'm in a cooking show. 25 gram like so, that's it. Now, when you feed her, you will always have an excess. This excess is what we call a sourdough discard. But don't discard it. It is very vibrant with life and it's very healthy. You can put it aside and collect it, and then you can make things like pancake or brownie, or of course bagels out of this. There's a lot of recipe out there. That's not what I'm going to talk about right now, but search about what sourdough discard can do for you. It's amazing. So you have this fresh 25 gram, and you put water. Remember, 1:4:4 ratio, so the water is 100 gram. Always put water first. Why? Because then you can stir it up and Norma get dispersed in the water, and it will be easier for her to colonize the fresh flour that will get put into her. Now, in 100 gram of flour that I'm going to feed her, 90 gram of it will be an organic white flour. There we go. A little more. More. See, our hand microflora will affect what lives in Norma, because there's no way around not touching anything when you're baking. You gotta touch things, you gotta feel. Like even right now when I'm touching this flour, I kind of can gauge like the temperature of the flour, and I could predict how long will this feeding last her. That's something that gets better with time. All right, there you go. Boom. Right, 25 gram Norma, 100 gram water, mix it, and then 100 gram of water. Stir it up until there is no dry flour that you can visibly see. You don't need to use a mixer, that will be overdoing it. You just need a spoon and a mindful eye. That you want to cover it up, because it will turn sour and will have an aroma, and that can invite all sorts of different creatures such as fruit flies. I like to cover it with a cloth like this, and then I like to cover it with this is a what is it? Shower cap. It's a shower cap, or you can put rubber band around it, whatever works. And that's a fitting. This will, especially with this kind of temperature, last her for at least 24 hours. Again, I can stretch it to 36 hours. In the next video, we will see how far she rises. Now, especially if you just started doing this, this is what I like to do. Mark it that this is where she started, and right now is 8 p.m. 3/23, like so. Here, like that. You see, like this is where she starts, and then you will see her rise, and she will come down. And that's feeding her, folks. Very straightforward and very easy. Now I'm going to demonstrate on how to make a levain out of Norma. See, it's very similar to feeding. All levain making is feeding, but not all feeding is levain making. That's how I understand it. Levain, you make it intentionally before you're going to make sourdough loaves. And because of that, you want a little bit more scheduled. You want to predict it a little bit of when it would be ready. levain is a very young starter. Like going back to feeding, it will rise and then it will fall, and when it goes all the way back down, that's when you feed her again. But making a levain, you use it not when it goes all the way back down. You use it when it's just before it reaches the peak of rising up. Now, it is very useful for us to kind of be able to predict when that point is. With experience, you will get better on catching that point. But for now, to get you started, this is what I would like you to try, and we can experiment it together. Again, to make a levain, it's similar to feeding. It's a 1:4:4 ratio. That's how I make a levain. And so there's 25 gram in here. There's 25 gram in here. Like so. And then, you guessed it, folks, 100 gram of water and 100 gram of flour. The difference is, the water, this is something, again, that you can gain through experience, but through my experience, if we put the water in a certain temperature, and in this case around 98 Fahrenheit, the levain, that peak of just before it reached the maximum expansion, can be catch in about 8 to 10 hours. See, like, it gives me a time frame to kind of know, okay, that's when I'm going to start baking, and that's when I want to start making a levain. So 25 grams of Norma, water that is 98 Fahrenheit, 100 gram, very good. Again, mix it first. And just like before, 100 gram of flour, 90 gram of white, and 10 gram of rye. Beep, 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 beep. You know, like, if I'm a pro YouTuber, it will be like fast forwarding right now. But I'm not sure I know how to do that, so if I can't find it out, then real time it is. There you have it. Mix it all up. So this is basically two of the same thing. One is Norma fad and one is a levain. The same exact thing, 25 gram of Norma, 100 gram water, and 100 gram flour. But the difference with the levain is that the water is warm, 98 Fahrenheit. It is also here. And I will put a name, levain. And on the next video, which I will shoot about 8 to 10 hours from now, we will see the difference in the rise of a feeding and of making a levain. And you can see the difference of temperature makes in Norma's behavior. Until then, I wish you to have a good night with your loved one and your sourdough starter. Bye.